I'm Bailey Parnell, and this is Let's Think This Through. Join me for drinks as I bring on guests for conversations that inspire, amuse, and challenge us, but in a fun and relaxing kind of way. Ultimately, it's to help us all learn and live a better, easier life. So let's think this through. Hello, all of you wonderful thinking buddies out there, and thank you for joining me on season 2 of Let's Think This Through. On this podcast, I bring on guests and we essentially drink and think together. Okay, maybe it's a little more complex, but honestly, not by much. I am Bailey Parnell. I am a global public speaker, a serial entrepreneur, and a researcher. So I do have my areas of expertise, sure, but I'm really just an intensely curious student of life. I do get to meet some pretty cool people in my life, but my best conversations often happen in exactly the same way, over a drink. Now, whether that is a coffee or a cocktail, I leave that one up to my guests on this podcast. So for today's guest, I am bringing back my number one thinking buddy who also opened season 1 with me. On this episode of Let's Think This Through, kicking off season 2, we have my husband, Hamza Khan. Now, a lot has happened since we recorded that last episode nearly a year ago. There have been businesses and books and trips and school and loss and grief and everything in between. And of course, we get into it. So please join me in welcoming for a drink my husband, Hamza Khan. Okay, it's me again before you get into the actual episode. I'm recording this one after we recorded, now that I know what we actually talked about. And I just think it's only fair to let you know ahead of time as kind of a trigger warning for anyone listening. Hamza and I did go through a couple of miscarriages earlier this year, and we did end up talking about it in the recording at the back half of the episode. And so I just thought it was only fair to let you know that that's coming your way. And I'm not going to lie, it's clunky. We are clearly still talking it out and reflecting in real time. And it's not with the same grace and, finesse, I guess, that you would expect from us or that we would expect from us. And so for that, I apologize because I know it's a sensitive subject. And at the same time, thank you for, listening to us and for being the community that we love so much who was there for us during this process. And I hope that in us talking about this even a little bit, it can give some insight into others who are going through the exact same thing, who reached out to us. And yeah, just wanted to let you know. Okay, go ahead and listen now. Welcome back to Let's Think This Through, season 2. We have, once again, my lovely husband, Hamza Khan.
I'm back. There we go. I've always wanted to say that for some reason. I feel like it is a refrain of many of my favorite hip hop artists. Even though we're very familiar with who they are, they tend to reintroduce themselves, which I appreciate because, you can never get tired of introducing yourself because there's a good chance that someone is hearing you for the first time. And so all of this is to say, I've always wanted to say that on a podcast, anywhere. I'm back.
Well, you are back. Yes, by popular demand.
True.
AKA most,
your dad.
Yeah, mostly just my family. My dad was like, "Oh, my favorite episode was Greg." So shout out Greg. Well, except for my son-in-law, he was my favorite episode. So
thank you, Dom. Love you.
But of course, you're my main thinking buddy, number one thinking buddy. So I like it. I think we should start every episode or every season this way.
I won't complain.
But I do think that you need to reintroduce yourself. Sure. And every hip hop fan would love that because a lot has happened. It was actually nearly a year ago that we filmed that first episode, if you can believe.
That is wild. It feels like it's been all of 2 minutes.
I know.
Sure. I'll reintroduce myself. My name is Hamza Khan. I am an author, educator, and entrepreneur. And along with my partner in life and in all things, I am the co-founder of Skills Camp, a leading soft skills development company. And I'm positively thrilled to be back because it is a rare honor and privilege to be not only the first guest of somebody's debut podcast, but to be asked to come back again to start the second season. And that is a luxury and something that's truly special to me because you could have had anyone. Your network is my network. I'm familiar with your very vast, sprawling network. And this selection is important because I know that there are a lot of people out there, a lot of couples even in our own circle, whose professional lives don't intertwine. And there's so much overlap in the Hamza Khan and Bailey Parnell Venn diagram. And so this feels like it's coming from the heart. And I appreciate that.
Oh, yeah. Well, we've done a lot of thinking together since then, but you're cute.
Oh my
and
goodness.
I'll have you on every season if you want to come on.
Every time I'll pretend like I am a hip hop artist reintroducing themselves. And I feel like I missed an opportunity a few seconds ago to be like, you could have been with anyone in the world, but you're here with me. And I appreciate that. If you know, you know.
Oh, I don't know, but that's okay.
Insider baseball, as Amanda would call that. Wow, okay. That's insider baseball all over again. Insider baseball is something that my podcast producer for the upcoming season of Ideas into Action, her name is Amanda Cupido. Shout out to Amanda. And she said, one thing that you do in your podcast, Hamza, is you make a lot of insider jokes and references to other episodes. And she calls it insider baseball. She's like, keep that to a minimum. So the reference that I made, for those of you who are unfamiliar, was a famous Jay-Z line, which is, you could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with me, and I appreciate that. And if you know me, you know I'm a huge hip-hop fan, specifically a Jay-Z fan. Although in light of the recent selection of Kendrick Lamar to headline the Super Bowl, I don't know where I stand, and we can talk about that later.
Ooh, scandalous.
Scandalous.
Do you want to talk about it now?
Maybe we'll save it.
Okay. All right. Well, on every episode of Let's Think This Through, including Hums, of course, I have everyone bring a drink, because that's where my best conversations happen, is over a drink. So tell people, what are you drinking today?
Well, a very boring coffee, old-fashioned coffee with some almond milk in here. I usually put cinnamon powder and turmeric as anti-inflammatory substances to help me, if you will. But even though it is a boring drink, it is in a very sentimental mug for me. This is the badass bearded uncle mug that was presented to me by my sister and brother-in-law to secretly announce that they're pregnant. So shout out to you, Nazia Numer.
Aw, cute. I'm drinking Bailey's today because
very on brand.
Yeah, exactly. That is the difference between Hamza and I. Basically summed up, I'm the kind of person to put you'd be the kind to put like a smidge of Bailey's in a coffee, whereas I am the kind to put a smidge of coffee in the Bailey's, as I have done today. So cheers to you.
Cheers, man.
And many more.
Also, I'm just going to say, this is really awkward, man. Like, we are in a very small recording space in our New York apartment. Our knees are touching. It is really hot. Things are very cozy.
Yeah.
And I also feel like we're both hyper aware that there's cameras here and there's lights here and there's a production. And I'm looking forward to sort of dropping the podcast voice, if you will. I think that's going to happen in a couple of seconds. And I think me just acknowledging that up front is part of that process.
Yo, last time we recorded this, you all messaged me about this after episode 1, because I recorded them virtually, and Hums and we were on 2 different virtual panes, and everyone was like, are you in the same house? And then I was like, yeah, but there's studio A and B and C, aka the living room and the dining room and the office. So this time, for you all, I put us on the same frame.
All right. And here we are. And, we look like we are somewhat far apart from each other on screen, but our knees are touching. And you know what? This is definitely the coziest recording setup I have ever had the privilege of participating in.
Listen, most people are going to hear it anyways. So let's get back to business.
Got you.
Tell the people what you have had going on since we last recorded, because it has been a year, and like nearly by the time they hear this, it will have been nearly a year since we last recorded, if you could believe that.
Man, this could be the entire episode. I mean, how detailed do you want me to get?
Honestly, where do you start? What are some things that have changed for you? So if you put yourself back to December, it would have been December 2023 before this, like all of 2024 started.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a truly abundant year. There has been the highest of highs, the lowest of lows. I have achieved professional successes that I have only dreamed of just on the way back last night from Calgary, where I presented at a conference for the Canadian Insurance Accountants Association. On the way back, I was reflecting on my feelings about the career that I get to enjoy today 10 years ago. And I remember it was right after social media camp, I think in 2013, so just 11 years ago. I was flying back from Victoria to Toronto, and I was thinking to myself, man, if only I could just do this for the rest of my life, like fly to conferences, mix and mingle and attend and learn and speak and, just advance the thinking of the people who compose these really exciting industries, my life would be complete. And here we are 11 years later, and that is quite literally my job description. And I'm so lucky. I feel so blessed to be able to do this. It doesn't feel real most days. So I got to experience the sustained, what's the word I'm looking for here? I'm getting to experience the compounding benefits of a career that is not a fluke anymore. And my deficit thinking, which I've been working very hard on, my survivor's remorse, and the whole host of sort of mental challenges that I wrestle with have led me to believe over the last 4 years that the other shoe was going to drop, that this was a flash in the pan, that this wasn't actually my career. I was getting to live out somebody else's life, and maybe this was all going to end very soon. But now I'm like nearly a decade into this. And I have been speaking for just over a decade, but I think I went pro, if you will, considering when I signed with Speaker Spotlight, shout out to the whole team, just 4 years ago. And I believe that once is an occurrence, twice is a coincidence, 3 times is a pattern. I am now well into pattern territory. And so I am now finally stepping into the role, the avatar, the persona, the way of thinking, being, and feeling befitting of the speaker that you think I am, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So I'm getting to enjoy now that life, that career, and it is very full. And that's just a tip of the iceberg of the entirety of the portfolio of work that I get to enjoy.
Well, I mean, I obviously get a perspective into it through you and through my own speaking, which is not nearly as robust yet. But I don't know. It's such a weird job. Like when I talk to people, they're like a public speaker. Like, what would you say is the most unexpected thing about being a public speaker, like that people wouldn't know as part of your job?
Me specifically, or the career or the profession?
You. The
thing that people are consistently surprised by when it comes to me as a public speaker, and this even just happened earlier today, I was on a discovery call learning about an event. The organizers of the event were surprised to learn that I'm actually very introverted, like to a fault, extremely introverted, probably the most introverted person I know. Introverted to the point where I am socially awkward. I'm extremely shy and bashful and meek in my personal life. But I play a very good extrovert on TV. When I get up on stage, you would never guess that I'm actually the person that I just described a few moments ago. But that's what people are consistently surprised by, that I'm not actually as gregarious, as funny, as outspoken, as theatrical as I am on stage. And even right now in this podcast, I find myself sort of defaulting back to some of those performative parts of myself that I think the ego is putting out there to protect the inner child Hamza that is right now being like, whoa, can you believe it? This is probably like podcast number 500 that you've done, Hamza, but not 500, but definitely up in the hundreds. Absolutely. And it's just surreal that like, this is actually a thing that I get to do, not just for my professional life, but to nurture my soul as well.
Well, that's actually that's interesting to me because maybe, how you were saying, like, it's kind of like awkward at first because you're sitting here with your wife and we're literally going on date night after.
Yeah.
But then
Hans Zimmer, MSG. Let's go.
Yeah. You know what? Hamza's so funny because I'm going to come back to that for sure. But Hamza's funny because he's like, the longer we've been together, which is like 9 years now.
Wow.
I know. So fun. So the more like drift compatible we are, I feel like people in long-term relationships understand this. So we will like send something to someone and not need to say anything. And like the whole conversation has been had in your head, or I'll send something to Hamza and he's like, I can't surprise you anymore because we've both had access to each other's calendars for ages. We're pretty planned people, especially with travel. So then with Hans Zimmer, I sent it to Hamza like probably I don't know, five months ago or something, right?
Yeah, when the announcement went out.
Yeah, and it was like, oh, it's coming to New York. We should go. Mm-hmm. And already you had said, oh man, like you had already got the tickets because like this is near my birthday. So you had already bought the tickets and you're like, oh man, I just like can't surprise you. And I was like, why did you tell me? I never would have known.
You know, the way that they've been advertising this, you would have found out for sure. I mean, it's every other sponsored ad on Instagram. But I just want to go back quick.
No, we will go back because I feel like the feeling of awkwardness, like, you know how you're saying there's like this tension between who you are as like putting on something for public on stage or in front of the camera. Yeah. But then when you're with me, that's when you're your most introverted, like most safest self. Sure. Do you feel like literally right now, let's think this through. In this moment, are you wrestling between that person and like being here with me?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm aware that it's not just you and me in the room right now. So much so that I actually want to go back a couple of seconds and clarify for the listeners, for the viewers, what drift compatible means. Speaking of insider baseball, right? It's a very deep cut reference from Guillermo del Toro's Pacific Rim, where they have these monsters, or these kaijus, let's be specific. And in order to counteract these kaijus that are coming from another dimension, human beings create these large mechs. But the mechs have to be piloted by two pilots. And in order for both sides of the pilot's body to move, the pilots have to be drift compatible, which means, I mean, and it's a really powerful metaphor. I wish more people watch Pacific Rim, because I would love to use it in workshops and keynotes and be like, hey, I mean, like leaders and followers need to be drift compatible. You need to be able to be psychologically safe with one another. You need to actively communicate with one another. You need to look out and hold each other and basically operate as one. Oh, yeah. And I mean, the whole tension of the first movie with Charlie Hunnam's character is he was such a lone wolf. He was so solitary in his approach to life and work that he wasn't drift compatible with anybody, but he actually had to get worn down as an individual to then be vulnerable enough and let somebody, I can't remember his drift compatible partner's name, the Japanese lady, but it'll come to me. Anyways.
That is funny.
All of this is to say that Bailey and I, over the course of a 9-year relationship, have been becoming increasingly drift compatible.
Yeah. And I feel like I didn't even realize sometimes, you know, when you make references, the other thing is, you know how long-term relationships have like a dictionary? You know, if you are listening, that you have words and phrases and references that make absolutely zero sense outside the context of the relationship.
That's true. We have our own little universe.
Oh, God. Yeah.
With its own words and colloquialisms and gestures and even telepathic lines of communication. It's fun, man. I enjoy it.
I mean, it's even happening right now.
It's happening right now, for sure.
I know. We'll talk about it later, but we're definitely having a whole other converson in our head right now. Okay, but back to business, because, you know, back to business. I got a podcast to host here. So another thing that you were not on paper in last time we filmed was you actually went back to school. You were not technically a student.
No.
You know, on paper.
No. And it was a blessing in disguise. I was enrolled at Toronto Metropolitan University, formerly known as Ryerson University, a joint program between TMU and YorkU called Communication and Culture. A lot of our friends, even some of the listeners and viewers, are part of this program. In fact, it's actually kind of weird that many of my former students have graduated from the program, and that's a whole other experience. What it's like to have students that have now become the master. Exactly.
That's where I got my master's.
And so I was deep into it. It was a virtual program, and I joined during the pandemic, and I was about 1.5 years into it. And then I was about to drop an expletive on the podcast, and maybe I should take it easy because now I know that my mom and my dad are listening to this as well. So my mom, hi dad, I'll take it easy. They insisted that I come back to campus to continue this education that we were successfully undergoing virtually. And this to me goes at the heart of many of the challenges that I think are part of this disengaging and dehumanizing workplace, where it's an absolute disregard for the individual learner, for the individual employee, and whoever is at the receiving end of the services being provided. Solutions were prescribed to me, for me, not with me. I had no part in the co-creation of the ideal learning conditions that would have allowed me to continue paying tuition and thriving in that program. But it was when I tried every possible configuration to continue that program. I even looked into the budget of what it would take to fly to Toronto, because we now live in New York, what it would fly to Toronto every single week to do this program. And I was just like, this doesn't make any sense. And I found that I was experiencing a cognitive dissonance of sort. There was a sunk cost fallacy. I wanted to continue with this program, but my soul was saying, this is not it, man. Like you're actually not enjoying this program. You're enjoying glimpses of it. And I decided, I'm going to put a pause on this. So I withdrew from the program with the possibility of rejoining. And in that lurch between programs and this past year, I was like, oh, wow, I actually wasn't having fun in this program. And I didn't know I wasn't having fun until I actually had extended time away from it. And this to me was refreshing because I said, what would it look like if I was re-engaged with this program? What would need to be true for me to throw myself at this program the way I've thrown myself at jobs that I've loved, to throw myself at a relationship that I love? And I made a list of all the possible factors. And what came up for me was it would have to be hybrid. It would have to be virtual first. It would have to fit within my schedule. I'd have to be able to work around it asynchronously. And it would have to be on a topic that I care deeply about. And for me, that's leadership. For me, that's the future of work. For me, that's organizational behavior, organizational psychology, all of that. And then I found a program that really spoke to me. This was at Columbia University. It was a executive master's in change management, change leadership specifically. But the caveat was that it was housed within the Department of Education. And where my focus is, even though I have a deep love for all things education, it is part of who I am. It is a system that I ultimately want to transform. It didn't enthrall the part of me that really wants to help adult learners in organizations and companies and nonprofits and institutions. And so it was between that, a program at NYU, and Penn State was a top contender. And so I applied to all three, and then Penn State got back to me and I was like, this is it. Like, you want me as much as I want you. We're drift compatible. And so I threw myself at this program, and now I'm a year in, and it has been so much fun. I mean, I'm getting an 8. Like it feels easy. Every course, every assignment is such a cakewalk for me because I'm so overpowered for this. It's what I do in my professional life. It's what I go to sleep thinking about. It's what I wake up thinking about. I dream about this stuff.
Well, tell them the name of the degree.
A Master's of Professional Studies in the Psychology of Leadership.
Which is like literally
so
what you write
The
about.
2 courses I'm in right now, one is unethical leadership and the other one is dysfunctional leadership. I mean, I was studying this irrespective of the program. And so I feel like I'm now going to be immersed. I mean, I now am immersed in a community of learners, people who are just as passionate, faculty members who are just as passionate about this, who are invested in my growth. And I'm going to walk away from this with a master's. And then my next step is to jump right into a PhD. So long-winded way of saying I am in a master's program. I'm going the distance.
Yeah, but I don't even think I've asked you this recently, but I feel like if you're listening, even a year ago, you would have thought like, oh, this dude is successful. Like, he's got a career. He's already studying this stuff. He's already writing about this stuff. And if we were here now and like you weren't in school, I don't think anybody would notice. So why did you choose to go back? Like, what compelled you to like re-engage the academic side of things?
Wow, that's very interesting. And I accept that compliment in the spirit in which it was shared. However, my internal monologue is always contradicting any success that I achieve. I actually do not believe in my heart that I am as nearly as smart and as successful and as capable as you think I am. I am plagued by deficit thinking. I am plagued by, just self-doubt. And I think that also lends itself to the effort that I apply in all of the work that I do. So I recognize that it's both a gift and a curse. But I actually frequently, almost on a daily basis, run into the edges of my thinking. I mean, even now, as I'm speaking, I'm realizing that I'm more superfluous than I know I can be. I know that I can communicate the same ideas that you're listening to right now much more succinctly. And I'm learning how to do that by subjecting myself to the academic rigor of the master's program right now. And I eagerly look forward to when I can even further consolidate those ideas into simple phrases and terms. But the challenge is that as you continue to develop as an academic, your thinking, your vocabulary, your conceptual understanding of the world and topics become so complex that you actually start to alienate people on the other side. So I'm constantly straddling 2 worlds, the world of the practitioner and the world of the academic. And I feel like I've reached the end of my life cycle as a practitioner because everything that I do in my professional life feels easy. But in the academic world, I'm consistently challenged. Like, for example, right now, we are going through in deep detail all of the available heuristics and shortcuts and biases that a leader may experience. And I know I would say 89% of these, 90% of these, but the 10% that I'm learning where I'm like, oh, wow, yeah, I thought I knew what the anchoring bias is. But here's what the anchoring bias actually is. Here's when it was discovered. Here are the implications for leaders in specific scenarios. Here's how it ties back to specific leadership styles. And here's how we can look at it through a Lewinian lens. And I'm like, wow, man, this is so cool. But then my challenge as a science communicator is to take everything I just said and to make it practical for somebody in the workforce. And so I'm loving that my world right now is such a spectrum of experiences. By day, I am studying, researching in this master's program. And then like one day can look like that. The very next day could look like standing before a group of students and representing those learnings in a way that is beneficial, not just to them, but to me as well. What's that saying? When one teaches, two learn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally relate to that as well. Like, I like the idea of almost forced time and space to think about the things you want to think about.
Right.
And that's what's happening kind of in my doctorate as well. It's weird. It's like, oh, you're paying for that. Like, can't you just go on a cottage weekend or something? But no, obviously I know that it's different too. And it's like a rigor.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think like to make the decision to make that investment, and it doesn't just have to be a master's. I know that a lot of people listening, they could just be like, I want to be a good parent. Like, I want to learn more about parenting and how do I fit this into my schedule or make this a priority, you know?
And you can do that. I do that more often than I subject myself to the curriculum created by others. But it is the curriculum created by others that I think presents the biggest challenge, especially when it's as rigorous as my current program. There's 2 assignments per week per course. And so like I would say that when I'm not doing anything professional, when I'm not on social media, when I'm not interacting with the people in my life, you can just assume that I'm either relaxing or studying. And that study sometimes becomes onerous to me. I mean, I straight up, this semester has been rough. I've had a slow start. I'm behind on a couple of assignments. I've already lost some marks, but I know I'm going to make up for it. I know I'm going to finish both courses with an A+, at the very least an A. But it's the subjecting myself to another person's structure, specifically somebody who has thought deeply about this, who has spent more time mastering the subject, that I think is really powerful here. And so these 2 professors that I have this semester, it's so beautiful to receive their feedback on my assignments because they're able to point out cognitive blind spots that I have. They're able to elaborate and draw connections between disparate points that are made by different students in the class and expose me to things that I normally wouldn't have considered. I mean, I had no idea up until this program how much of a beast, a monster, a figure Northhouse was in the world of leadership. Right? We know who our leadership scholars are, right? Bernard Bass and James McGregor Burns, so on and so forth. But this entire time, I'm like, whoa, there was this guy Northhouse that was existing in the world of academia the entire time. And I feel a little bit embarrassed now looking back and being like, yeah, he was an ever-present figure here. And
yeah, I guess that's kind of weird, because you when you go in and you start like recognizing these thinkers, really, these thinkers' names that have been passed down through the years, it's like, oh, we were already using their ideas. But when you're forced to like get into it from a citation standpoint, you're like, oh.
And if I may just quickly, like, before I wax poetic about like all of the scholars in the field of leadership, I think one of the things that's truly special about this opportunity to be with you specifically on the podcast is that you are genuinely a one-of-one, a generational thinker. And I'm not just saying that as your partner, but I mean it sincerely. Like, I'm around a lot of quote unquote thought leaders. And I would say a lot of the thought leadership industry, and I would even put myself into that category to a certain extent. We're here today and we're gone tomorrow. You know, like
I don't think that.
We're of the moment. We're advancing an idea, and the idea is bigger than us. So I exist in service of the idea. But every now and then, a thinker comes around that like generates a truly novel idea, or adds a spin to an idea, or like pushes an industry and a way of thinking beyond boundaries in ways that they're not celebrated for when they're alive, but we all get to live in that world. For example, Dr. Christina Maslach, you know who that is. For the average listener and viewer, you probably don't know who Dr. Christina Maslach is, but you live in her world. Dr. Christina Maslach is considered the godmother of burnout research. And everyone who is familiar with burnout research, including people in our lives, fellow thought leaders like Dr. Robin Hanley Defoe, for instance, we all cite the research of Dr. Christina Maslach. She was the one who introduced the idea of upstream factors which dictate why people burn out in organizations. And you have more followers than her on Instagram. You probably have more engagement on LinkedIn. No, but hear me out. The point I'm trying to make right now is that she's not of the moment. And she's not going viral. She's not on a best-selling list right now. But when everything clears, when all the sediment settles, everybody who's spoken about burnout will be forgotten. Nobody's going to cite shit from what was quoted at a random conference 2 years ago where people gave a standing ovation.
That sounds so sad.
No. But the point I'm trying to make here is that, like, let me just package it in a much more succinct way. At the end of Pound Cake 2 on Nothing Was the Same, Drake samples his dad and his dad goes, "Only real music's going to last. All that other bullshit is here today and gone tomorrow," right?
Gosh.
And this is why I'm so obsessed with the idea of going all in on scholarship, because I believe, like you, that I have truly novel ideas about leadership and the future of work. But until I can get them published in a way that will be cited by our peers and actually be taught to other students, and not just live on a keynote stage or live on a LinkedIn post or live on an Instagram story or on a TikTok, I mean, that is how knowledge is truly going to be disseminated. And you know this, like when we sit in keynotes and we watch somebody speak, we remember the feeling. We remember maybe one or two
and the
ideas.
Stories,
and
for
the
sure.
story.
Their stories, yep, absolutely.
But so much of knowledge is gained, again, by subjecting yourself on a regular basis to the idea.
That's interesting. I think that ideas can spread and that they can stay with you from just one keynote. Like I feel like you have done that to people. It's so funny that like you don't include yourself in that category because
I'm in it.
I know,
but
I mean that they would cite like your talk would be one that is quite literally screened in courses.
Man, let me talk my shit. I've been cited, right? I've been published in multiple books. I think that I exist in at least hundreds of curriculums. You can go on hamzakhan.ca and go and see the scholarship.
Yeah.
Like you can see it. Like I'm really him, okay? Like I'm really that guy. Like don't put some respect on my name, man. Like I know what I'm doing. Like the textbook is right behind you. The best-selling organizational textbook, one of the authors, your boy. But I know that it was so easy for me to do this. And I'm constantly challenging myself to be like, if I could do that with the gifts that I have that are half developed, I really owe it to myself to go the distance. I kind of feel like the Airbender, Aang the Airbender. We didn't actually finish that. But like Aang the Airbender is just constantly resisting the call to action. He's just comfortable only mastering one of the disciplines, which is bending air. But part of his hero's journey is learn how to bend fire, learn how to bend water, and become the avatar. And I feel like that's the journey that I'm still on. I'm forever going to be in the beginner's mindset. And I truly believe that once I achieve my doctorate, once I begin my next iteration as a tenured professor, as a researcher, that's when my real career will begin. Everything up until that point is a mixtape.
Wow, I really don't think, that's so interesting because I think a lot of people listening would not see your career that way, but it's always like insightful even to talk to you because like I also respect your career and you're further along in many ways and you teach me all the time. But
that's an honor, by the way.
So cute. But like for others looking at it, I'm not sure if they would think, how does an expert think about them as an expert? But this kind of stuff that we do is literally why we have to schedule a date night.
Yeah,
because there's a lot going on. And I feel like if I looked at us, I would be like, you know what? They're not like they're the kind of couple that schedule a date night. Yeah. And not in a cool way. You know what I mean?
I welcome the description of me as a thought leader. But the truth is that I am a lifelong student, man. I'm a lifelong learner. The only reason why I feel like I have any competence when it comes to public speaking and writing and all of the different outputs that you know me for is because I am a genuine student. I mean, I am always learning. I'm a good speaker because I'm a good writer. I'm a good writer because I'm a good reader. I'm a good reader because I'm a good listener. I mean, it all funnels back down to curiosity as one of my values.
Mm-hmm. And I think we share that, obviously. I mean, although I will say, like, we sound very nice right now, but when it's actually just us, we are the weirdest people.
This is true. This is
like
true.
I feel like we've got both sides, you know? When it's just us and there's no cameras, I think we devolve.
I don't like the term devolve.
Okay.
I get it for comedic value. I think we morph. How about that? We're like animorphs, basically. Another deep cut reference. I'm showing my aging millennialism. I'm an aging millennial, whatever. But yeah. I feel like we just change. Like we're the same people, but we become characters that are part of the Hamza Bailey universe. Does that make sense?
I feel like I devolve. Like sometimes when it's just you and me on the couch on the end of a Friday, like I don't even think I'm using proper sentences. Yeah. I don't even know if I'm saying words.
It's all subconscious routines at that point, eh?
Yeah, it's like back to the universe.
Yeah,
which we call Peebooverse.
Yeah, and I think we have to explain Peebooverse, right? Like Peeboo is this weird Instagram account that Bailey found. Bailey finds the weirdest Instagram accounts. She sent me these two cartoonists out of Brazil, I believe. And like they have an Instagram account called Peeboo Bear, which is just like this couple and their dog. And it's just like these like very ordinary couple interactions. Like, you know, dude is doing the dishes and then the partner comes and squeezes his butt. And then you see his like eyes.
I'm the partner.
Yeah. And his eyes light up. And then Bailey will send that to me with no context. And like in lieu of the context, I have to fill in the blanks and be like, oh, Bailey thinks this is us, right?
Okay. Yes. And to be fair, well, I think we spend more, not in like a, not in a sad way. I think we spend more time apart, like physically apart than most couples because of how much we travel.
True.
And we have like a very strong, always on text stream or IG, like DM chat message thing. And it is basically just memes.
and for the most part, I would say it's unidirectional. Is Bailey sending me shit?
Right? No, it's not. Okay.
I said for the most part, right?
It is not. It is you sending. I'm opening it. I'm opening it right. Okay, everybody.
Actually, okay. Wow.
Yeah, I'm gonna see the last. Let's go on to Instagram and let's see the last 5 memes we have sent each other. Now, by the way, I don't entirely remember what all of them are, so this could be.
I'm going to guess though, right? Like one of them for sure has something to do with Lord of the Rings.
Oh yeah.
Another one is like something that's like super sweet, like coupley. Another thing is going to be about like New York in the fall or winter. Like they fall into very predictable categories.
Okay, so
let's go.
We do have some Lord of the Rings humor, LOTR humor, love it.
Classic.
3 movies, 17 Oscars, like what's not to love? Also my favorite movie. And like you, what? So then I'll just send it and be like, oh, fun. I don't know. Apparently I also sent you a picture of someone roasting marshmallows on their gas stove fire and thought, we should do this. Is this safe? Is this safe? You sent me, Amex pre-sale, Denzel Washington, Jake Gyllenhaal of Fellows coming to Broadway.
Oh my God, that is so good.
You sent it and the context is we should go at some point, you know? You're just hoping the other person picks up the baton and books it.
That's so good, man.
We got, I sent you brain scientists discover memory glue that makes memories stick for a lifetime.
Well, that's actually fire, though.
I know. Exactly. Like, it's interesting. Oh. This one, you actually look really cute.
You got to describe it.
I know. Should I say? Okay. Cute. Okay, so Hamza sent this one to me, and it's really cute, actually.
Sometimes I get carried away, yo.
Aw, because this is your sweeter man moment. But basically, it's like, who's that? Henry Cavill?
Henry Cavill.
He's like looking off like this. If you're watching, he's like kind of like looking off happily into the sunset.
Man of Steel, right before he becomes Man of Steel when he's looking out at the hurricane.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And it says, when she catches you staring at her and she says, "What?" And you say, "Nothing," but deep down she's everything you prayed for.
You know, listen, man.
I told you it wasn't just me, but you're so cute.
At the end of a long travel day, your defenses are down a little bit and you're more vulnerable and susceptible to sweeter man things. And, happen. I'm proud of it.
Oh, so
I'm
cute.
glad you're into that, man. There's nobody else I want to share that with. Maybe except MVP.
And VP is like a group of guys that Hamza grew up with from the time that they were very, very young. There's like 13 of them and they still talk.
That's it. I believe that every member of the South Asian diaspora, every dude has this crew. And if you are listening to this and you don't have that crew, consider me part of your crew.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, that's a really loving crew. There's a lot of them. But okay, so I read, actually, and y'all, you should look this up yourself, that couples that, and I'm going to say friendships too, couples and friendships that send memes to each other are close.
Pebbling.
Pebbling.
Yeah, you know pebbling, right?
That's what it's called?
Yeah, pebbling.
I was thinking like they're sending like a bid, but what's pebbling?
Pebbling, I believe it's when penguins give each other pebbles as like signs of affection.
Oh.
Yeah, something like that. I can't remember where I saw this. Probably LinkedIn, but yeah.
Yeah, pebbling.
Yeah.
And so you can do it with friends as well.
Yeah.
And it's basically just like, it's just like it's called Let's Think This Through, right? So we're obviously overanalyzing everything, but it's part I'm thinking of you, but it's also like shared jokes. It's also like creating stronger bonds.
Socializing agent.
Yeah, it's cute. So even though the entire conversation might be sending memes back and forth, it is pebbling.
It's pebbling. There we go.
It's love.
Hey, I'll take it.
We think things through, and you happen to be my husband and the opener of the season, so we can get back to business. You have also started writing a book. How about that?
Man, I've been writing this book. This one is all-consuming, man. Just the notes alone are 400 pages. Sorry, the notes on links are 400 pages.
Wait, which one are you talking about? Because I'm talking about Bad Bosses.
Yeah, but Bad Bosses is now spawning from a larger project. So shortly, right after the burnout gamble, I took a little bit of a break, and then I began this iteration of the career journey that I'm on. And when the pandemic happened, very quickly I was compelled to write Leadership Reinvented. But Leadership Reinvented was a book of the moment. It is still such a valuable book. It is a book that continues to surprise me because it's taken on a life of its own. But there's so much more I wanted to say. And I started to distill all of the ideas that didn't make it into Leadership Reinvented into the next project. And that just ballooned. Mm-hmm. And the working title of the book at the time was Beyond Burnout, which I've since turned into a keynote. But the ideas have extended well beyond burnout. And the book just became so big that I actually was experiencing a bit of paralysis when it came to writing it. And so I had to then split it right down the middle. I had to find the heart of the book and realize that it has two conjoined hearts, and let me split them and let me write the book that is going to resonate with the moment right now and then graduate up to the magnum opus, as I'm calling it. Mm-hmm. And I know that I'm going to write many other books. It might not even be my magnum opus, but it's the books right now that are drawing me to them, or the ideas are drawing me in. And I feel like the manifestation, the way I'll be able to sort of express my ideas and lock them in a way that's accessible, is through these books. But yes, the book that is being born at the moment is a book that is about bad bosses. And I can't say any more than that.
Why?
Because I don't want it to be a book about bad bosses. I think that is what you and Kareem and James. So earlier this year, Bailey, a mentor of mine, James Hunt, shout out to James, and one of my boys, Kareem, we all went to Hawaii to help me with sort of where my career is going to go and sort of design the next 10 years. And part of that was these twin books. And I actually gave all three of them, including Julian, who was there, James's son, shout out to Julian, a chapter from my book. And they all read it. They all enjoyed it. They all provided great feedback. But what I noticed, because I was observing this, I was the watcher. I'm like, what did you guys resonate with? How are you describing the book? And the thing that everybody came back to me with was bad bosses. And I'm just like, man, like that is not actually what I want the focus of the book to be on, because the book is actually about the force that animates bad bosses. And so bad bosses is the keyhole issue into something much bigger. And so I'm still playing with that positioning and how I can explore the force that is resulting in behavior that we perceive to be bad from leaders, if that makes sense.
No, it makes sense because that's like who you are as a thinker. But I do think also that the parts of it that are about like bad, or how we could say ineffective or dark triad leaders, and like who they are and what to do about it is something that's really not been explored in a really big way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's a couple of books on it, but not a lot, right? Snakes and Suits is one of them. Corruptible by Brian Klaas is another one. I would say like those are the books that are the most adjacent to what it is that I'm trying to write at the moment, what is being written. But with this book, I really want to challenge the readers, because Leadership Reinvented was very much a book that was accessible to leaders at all levels. The next book that I'm writing is specifically for leaders who are aware that something is askew in the status quo. And so I'm starting with that as the scaffolding and building from there. It's a book for advanced leaders, advanced readers.
Okay. Well, I think that that will be even interesting for me, because I haven't written a book yet, to see how that unfolds. And it's like kind of interesting to see the process. But this does lead me to my episodic segment for you. Go. So these ones I actually prepare people. So on every episode, I have a segment that I choose just for the guest, and including Hamza. And this one, yours is called Wishful Thinking. Now, in Wishful Thinking, this is where we discuss hopes, dreams, or aspirations related to the episode's topic. Even if they seem kind of idealistic or far-fetched, it's a space for kind of optimistic speculation.
Sure.
And like shared personal desires. So for you, in the best case scenario, what impact do you hope that your book would have on people who read it? What changes or shifts in behavior would you secretly want to see in workplaces as a result?
Ooh, that's
and
good.
This is wishful thinking.
Yeah. I'm glad you asked that question, because this is always my biggest challenge with any creative work that I do, which is detaching the unique value proposition from what is good for me and making it good for other people. So I appreciate you asking this question. I would hope that this book empowers people with the concepts, the language, and overall the lens to detect bad bosses in modern workplaces and defend themselves against it. And let me be even more specific. My niece, Ayat, 3 years old. In 10 years, she's going to enter the workforce. And by the time she enters the workforce, I would hope that the work that we're doing today will result in all organizations having robust, belonging mandates, DEI mandates, fulfilled ESG commitments, truly modern workplaces that are human-centered. But even in the most outwardly human-centered organizations, bad bosses morph, they adapt, they change, they hide. And I know this because I am a casualty of one such workplace. And so I would hope that this book is something that my niece, Ayat, could read before she enters the workplace and go and interview from a position of power and ask the right questions and look for the potential cracks in the organization through which a destructive, dysfunctional, dark triad leader could enter and make her life, God forbid, a living hell the way that a boss did for me.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Because one of the things that I think is not even interrogated enough or thought about enough, I think, is just how much influence a leader, or just your direct manager, like you listening, your direct leader, has on your well-being as a person.
man.
Like, if you think about it, the person of authority in your life after school or after you leave your parents or something is that direct boss. And I don't think it's taken seriously enough the moral, like ethical position that is in most people's life and how much influence it has on their mental, physical, spiritual well-being.
Yeah. Unhappy employees or unhappy sons, unhappy brothers, unhappy fathers, unhappy mothers, unhappy partners, unhappy people, this categorization of employee is a false dichotomy. We're talking about the whole human being. And so whatever happens in the world of work absolutely spills over into the world outside of work, if you will. And conservatively, Gallup has found that managers, people leaders, account for at least 70% of the variance in employee engagement scores. Conservatively.
Yeah, that's right. And to me, it's if a role can have that much influence in someone's life, like think about it, a third of your life spent somewhere, and one person potentially has up to 80%, up to 70 to 80% of the highest amount of impact on how you feel about yourself and your engagement in a third of your life. That is a position of greater power than I would say like your average middle manager is thought about. Like, I don't think people think about themselves as a middle manager thinking I have that much power.
Yeah.
But you do.
And let me just add, yes, and you say a third of your life. It's actually half your life because you spend a third of it asleep. And take it from somebody whose life was rendered miserable by a bad boss. I mean, like, when you look at the Gallup State of the Workplace report, 85% of employees say they're disengaged. But if you look at the user or the what's the word I'm looking for here? Like the granular data essentially from each of the reports, and you look at like the specific phrases that they use words like miserable, suffering, surviving. And who is this affecting the most? It's affecting women. It's affecting working mothers. It's affecting new hires, Gen Z, people of color, essentially the future of the workforce, the future of staff. And I have been that person. And I'm telling you that I was miserable during the workday, and I was miserable outside of the workday, and I was starting to have nightmares about it too. So it became actually all consuming. And so like, I appreciate what it is that you're trying to communicate here, which is still pretty big. It's a third of your life. But if you are at the receiving end of a monster manager, it can become your entire life.
Oh, yeah. Oh my gosh. No, 100%. So you're asleep. So it's a half of your waking life in the very least. And then it affects your relationships at home. You know what it's like, everyone, to come home stressed or you wrote recently about the Sunday scaries. Like, your Sunday with your family is part taken away mentally because you are afraid of going to work on Monday. Like, that to me is not taken not as seriously as it should. And when I mean taken seriously, it's like, not just title, but how are leaders prepared? Like, how is a manager prepared to handle I would say, very powerful responsibility of holding up to 80% of engagement of other people's lives in their work? You know what I mean?
Sorry, minimum 70%, as high as 100%. And the answer is they're not. And I've been coy about it for too long. And I just got back from Calgary where I presented at that conference. And I actually went up on stage and I said, we've reached the end of the life cycle of the utility of a solitary leader. I do not believe that any individual person who is a leader of an organization or institution has the ability anymore to co-create solutions that respect the will of the people in this volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous operating environment. And nor should they. I don't believe that one person should be the person that is making the decisions on behalf of everyone else. We actually have to resist the idea that either Trump or Kamala Harris or anybody else is going to be able to make decisions on behalf of the rest of us. We now have the technology to transcend these human limitations.
Are you talking about AI?
Absolutely, I'm talking about AI. But we have to get this moment right because we're still defaulting to this great man theory of leadership. And I see this mistake even being made in the realm of AI. We're still lionizing and deifying people like Sam Altman and Elon Musk, like they are going to be the saviors. And I'm like, no, guys, let's not wait for Superman or Superwoman or whatever. We are the people. We now have the tools, the technology, the will, and we have just irrefutable evidence that the prevailing system is not working anymore. And if I know this with my limited understanding of how the world works and my limited academic pedigree, this is going to be a cakewalk to explain to everybody else. And I'm in a rush to get this message out to as many people as possible.
It's a fiery one because I know when you start talking, like we see what you're saying is it's not that these things don't matter, like the figureheads of political parties, right? But they are, I think we sometimes all forget that they are a figurehead and they are not going to solve the problem. There's like ideas that underpin it. There's people that make the stuff happen. And we can't discount our power in that too, right?
Theoretically, you're right. But if you watch the amount of personal pronouns that they used and the amount of bickering that they did in that debate, I'm like, no, this is not it. Mm-hmm. Like you are playing a zero-sum game. It is like my team at the expense of your team. What I would love to see is both of them sit down and say, hey, let's not do this thing anymore. Let's not play the game the way that the game has been prescribed to us. Let's collaborate. Let's find out who else can we bring into the fold that represents the will of the American people. And I would love to see that model replicated across the world. And I think it does exist in other countries, participative democracies, representative democracies. I think that, throughout Europe, there's many examples of a better political system. But that's just one microcosm, which is, I guess, a macrocosm. It's like the biggest circus that we're paying attention to. That is indicative of the underlying problem that we are still living in the aftermath of scientific management, of the great man theory of leadership, which posits that one person can make decisions on behalf of everyone else. And the objective of any organization is to win, is to juice the total amount of value from the endeavor. And I think that's an idea that has to die yesterday.
I think so.
I get fired up.
Maybe it's the heat that we're having.
Possibly. It is still very much summer in the middle of September in New York.
Yeah, it's pretty hot outside today.
Hot, but
contrary to my cool fall coat that you see here.
No, people are straight up sunbathing with cheeks out.
Actually.
Right? It's the dark upside of global warming, right?
Yeah, that's a whole other thing too. But all that's to say, a lot has happened in a year since we last chatted. And personally, professionally, and of course, academically, right?
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, personally, there's been some shit that I think has contributed to this kind of fervor that you've been feeling and that you're kind of expressing right now.
True.
You want to share?
No.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, I'll share, but it will come to no surprise to people that follow Bailey and myself on social media that we experienced a miscarriage earlier in the year. When was it?
Well, we actually had
March, April.
Yeah. So where do you even start with this? Like, because there's less joking here. So we just after actually last time you heard from Hamza, we decided that we were going to start trying for kids. So it's kind of like personal, but we kind of I shared one story about it online already, and people like really came back to me sharing their stories and saying that they had never told anybody. So, and I was so like, I was not surprised because I know that this is something that like, especially women, and you know what, we have learned, especially men, my gosh, have been conditioned to not really talk about. So anyways, all that's to say, beginning of the year, we had a first miscarriage in March. That was mentally rough because it was kind of like, for me, like a loss of innocence moment. And then people don't really know this one yet, but we recently had one. A second. So yeah. We had so basically got pregnant again pretty quickly and was fine with that. Like everything was, I mean, in terms of like everything being good, all tests came back, no particular reason for it, which is kind of good because it means that it's not something like genetic that's going to happen every time. But the second one was like no heartbeat at 12 weeks. And that one was weirdly less mentally like messy for me at least, but physically it was literally painful because there was what's called a DNC operation after, if you are aware of that kind of stuff. So, but I think weirdly, I'm talking about me. One of the things that I thought was profound in this experience was seeing men come to you. And I had women talking to me about it and saying the things like they had never shared this in their life, like people in my own family I didn't even know. But then when I saw men coming to you, it was like a whole different thing.
Yeah. And me going to other men to talk about this and unpack it, right? There's a very small, tight group of dudes in my life who have unfortunately walked this same path, and we check up on each other. And it's a beautiful thing that is bringing us closer together, and it's quite cathartic and healing in the process. But, to your point, I'm still in awe of how commonplace this is. I mean, I actually had no idea that my own mom experienced this. So, and this fruit fly is like really something, eh? Like it's like a safeguard against us, like going fully vulnerable. Sorry, I got derailed. I think that's just my inner defense mechanism, not wanting to engage with the subject.
Well, we don't have to. I mean, that's the thing, right? But all of this is, we will share when we are good and ready to share. But I think all the perspective shifts that have come from it are literally, you can hear us still thinking it out. Like, we are still thinking through what it means for me, for us, for everybody. It's just like, there's no like right way. So we don't need to talk about it anymore if we don't want to.
I mean, look. The only reason why I am feeling in the moment hesitation to engage with it is because I know that on the other side of the conversation, it's just, I'll be incoherent. I don't think I'll be able to carry on with the podcast. There's such a deep, like a chasm, a void of emotions that are so uncharacteristic of the Hamza that most people know. I'm talking about like a cocktail of rage, resentment, disappointment, withdrawal. It's not good. Like it's, if I allow myself to truly engage with those ideas and those feelings in a way that is on display for you and for the people that we have fortunate to pay attention to this conversation, I'm concerned that I have the ability to drag y'all into the abyss. Because I know I'm persuasive. I know that like I have the ability to explain why people can easily give in to cycles of fear. And I'm afraid. I'm afraid that if I entertain those ideas publicly, it may take you and it may take people in our life to a place that I don't know they want to go. And so for you and I to come so close to mortality earlier this year was jarring. And you combine that with our vivid, vast, cinematic inner worlds. And what happens is, you go to a place that's beyond burnout. You go to a place that is confusing, that's overwhelming, that has you second guessing everything. And it's a place I don't want to go back to.
I understand that. And I think like you just went, deep in there. And I know, obviously I'm living it with you, that we're still, it's like a constant thing that you're still literally thinking through, literally. Like you're like, you're finding, I found for me, it's like, there's no like going back. There's no like, trying to get back to Bailey before or something like that. Like whenever it comes to grief or loss, it's like, there's just a new you, like there's a new thing. It's with you. This is part of your identity now. Learn to live as that person. Like, don't try to go back to who you were. That's just how I deal with grief. But I can hear you still dealing with grief. Like that's just our reality. Like that's, you're literally hearing it.
Yeah. I'm not the same person who I was before both these experiences. Yeah.
Yes, it's like, oh yeah, that's facts.
I'm not the same Hamza.
What would you say is the mindset or the thing that loss most made you learn about life?
Yeah. Look, no matter what, I'm an eternal optimist. I'm hopeful. I love life. I love people. I take a very sort of like light triad approach to all of my relationships, even with myself. Like I believe that people are ends unto themselves, and that's a beautiful thing. They're not means to an end. I believe that people, all people, are like deserving of or I should say, have intrinsic value, like, and they're worthy of dignity. And I believe that people are fundamentally good. And this proximity to death that we've experienced, for me, has given me a deeper appreciation for the fragility of life. It's made me aware of how ephemeral it is. It's made me aware of how impermanent and fleeting it is. And so I now truly value the very brief moments that I have with people in my life, me, you, our friends, our parents, siblings, nibblings, total strangers. And it's also given me a sense of urgency. Not to say that that sense of urgency wasn't there prior to, but I believed I had a lot more time before these sudden losses. And it is now undeniably clear to me that I don't have that much time.
A lot has happened.
Yeah.
But we got this. We'll get through this.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, everyone, it's Bailey here again, recording this after the episode. At that moment, Hamza and I just took a break to gather ourselves and take a hot minute after what we had just talked about. I know that some of you can relate. And again, I'm sorry as it was kind of a clunky conversation about a serious topic, but we're kind of going through it in real time. So take a breath with us and we'll get back to the episode.
I actually had a segment for you, Thought Experiments, which is on every podcast. And actually, this one was called If Life Were a Movie.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah, and it's fun. It's like weird because it's like you have now heard all of the ups and downs of the last year.
Yeah.
So if your life were a movie, like this last year,
like January onwards,
including the stuff like I know we're obviously talking about the worst parts of it right now, but even earlier in our conversation, the better parts of it, and the fun parts of it. So if life were a movie, what genre would it be?
Ooh.
And what key scenes or moments would make it into the film?
Yeah, I mean, the way it plays out for me is like something that would be directed by like a Terrence Malick, like a dream sequence, inner monologue juxtaposed with visions of the universe, and parallels being drawn between like the forming of the planet and like the forming of new identity. So I'm thinking like a Knight of Cups, for instance, but not as pretentious. So maybe like closer to a deep character study, a melodrama like an Oppenheimer, like the internal world of a human being that on the surface plays out one way, but then like, there's these like jarring cuts between like what the person is going through and world events. And so
You can see that.
I can even make it even simpler. I would just do like a very serious melodrama, a heavy melodrama, like a Damien Chazelle style. So like, yeah. Let me give you like the Venn diagram is like Damien Chazelle, Terrence Malick, Christopher Nolan. It's about, I guess if it's it's about me, it's like from my perspective, what's happening. But of course you are a main character in that story. Actually, interestingly, I don't know if you know this, but in the aftermath of the first miscarriage, I journaled a lot. And that was actually part of what helped me to overcome the feelings of grief. And, one of the things I learned this year was this concept of one day is not promised. We don't really have a one day. The one days are made. The one days can happen to you, or you can do whatever you can to realize them in the moment. And so what you have to do is like flip the one day into day one. And so like how I was able to sort of get out of that funk a little bit was just by journaling and writing. And in the aftermath of the first loss, my journaling was kind of incoherent. It was like one word. It was like anger at God and the universe. It was just like meditations on there not being any meaning to all of this.
Yeah, but I do think that journaling and thinking about how it would even present. I know that you came up with poetry too. It's like I feel like that's a normal thing of life that is a healthy way to express emotions, and when you have new emotions, it's like people express anger, these things that you've talked about, like anger and void and depression and disassociation, like that could go really wrong. So like coming up with some writing or poetry, or even thinking about a movie, like you are literally a writer, like that's a healthy way to express.
I think so.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I feel everyone, you've really, really entered into it started off a lot lighter, didn't it? Our Let's Think This Through episode, but this is really real, really what we would, and it's the whole gamut of our life over the last year. And we are coming to the end of this episode. I think we will end it, and you are weirdly going to kick it off again for the entire season. So the way that I end every episode is with train of thought, as you might remember from the first season.
Yeah.
So I have my guest kind of sum up one of the big ideas from the episode. And then on the next episode, I give it to that guest and say, how would you connect that to this big idea from the first episode?
Okay.
So we have really covered, I would say, the spectrum of emotion and life, and we've thought through a lot of things. What would you say is one big idea that you'd want to pass forward to the next guest in this train of thought?
Ooh, I think the big idea, and I want to find a way to make it useful. Are you allowed to tell me who's coming next? Or is it a surprise?
You can't know.
Okay,
yeah.
fine.
I know who it is, but you can't know.
I think the big idea, one of like many of the ideas stood out to me from this conversation that I've had with you. But I think a big one that is consistent across all of the different sort of segments here has been the limitations of the individual to navigate change. As a solitary endeavor for one human being to move through a volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous operating environment is extremely difficult. We actually don't have the tools, the resources, even like the biological capacity to handle it ourselves. So knowing that we have reached the end of a life cycle of the utility of the individual to navigate change, what possibilities? So should I frame it as a question?
You can just say what was one big idea from the episode, and I feel like I'm pulling from what you just said is it's hard for an individual to navigate change like alone.
Yeah. So it is hard for an individual to navigate change. However, we have the blueprints of how to do this collectively with and through other human beings, as well as the now or the potential of godlike technology in the form of generative AI and all of its permutations. What could it look like for an individual, a collective, to co-create a better reality, either with other people and or technology that allows them to transcend human limitations?
That's a big one.
Hey.
Good luck to the next guest. I feel like that one could be a whole entire episode on its own.
Yeah, man.
All right. Hums, thank you for coming and joining me again.
My pleasure.
I think everybody, thank you for joining us again on season 2 of Let's Think This Through. We have taken you all over the spectrum. So if you're still here, I'm impressed with you, and I can't wait till we can hang out and talk about it. I think right now we probably need to go just have a breather about everything that we've just covered. And I'm sure I'll come back to you soon with another episode. So thank you.